It is just before midnight on the 5th of July, 2011, and the Brillante Virtuoso is drifting 10 miles off the coast of Yemen. She is a Suezmax tanker, 274 meters of steel, built in 1992, loaded with fuel oil, 26 crew aboard, most of them Filipino. They are sitting in the Gulf of Aden, in the middle of what the shipping industry calls the high-risk area, because in 2011, this is where Somali pirates take ships for ransom. A small boat comes out of the dark. No lights. 7 armed men. They call up to the bridge and they say they are the authorities, and the captain believes them. He gives the order to lower the pilot ladder and he lets them climb aboard his ship. 4 hours later, the Brillante Virtuoso is on fire. The crew are in a lifeboat, and an American warship is pulling them out of the water one by one. The owners will file an insurance claim for $77 million. 8 years later, a judge in London will spend 52 days examining that claim, and will conclude that almost none of that night was real. This video is built on the judgment of the English Commercial Court in Suez, Fortune Investments, and Piraeus Bank against Talbot Underwriting, and on the reporting of Bloomberg journalists Matthew Campbell and Kit Chellel in their book Dead in the Water. Everything you are about to hear about what happened on that ship is a civil court finding, made on the balance of probabilities. Nobody has ever been criminally charged over any of it, and the man at the center of it denies wrongdoing. Where something is unproven, I will tell you. Start with the ship, because the ship is the motive. On paper, the Brillante Virtuoso belonged to a company called Suez Fortune Investments. In practice, she belonged to a Greek ship owner named Marios Iliopoulos, and by 2011, she was a problem. She was 19 years old. In tanker terms, that is late middle age. The court heard that she was losing money and that her owner was under serious financial pressure. Here is the number that matters. She was insured under a war risk policy for about $77 million. Her actual market value at the time was estimated at around $15 million, so she was worth more destroyed than she was afloat, roughly 5 times more. How is that even possible? Because marine hull policies do not work like the insurance on your car. The insured value is not an appraisal. It is a figure agreed between the owner and the underwriters when the policy is written, and once it is agreed, that is the figure that gets paid if the ship becomes a total loss, whatever she would actually fetch on the open market. In a rising market that protects an owner from having to argue about valuations in the middle of a crisis. In a falling market, on an aging ship, it quietly turns a liability into a lottery ticket. Now go back to that night. The 7 men come aboard. They do not behave like pirates. Somali pirates in 2011 had a method, and it was consistent because it was a business. You take the ship, you take the crew, you sail somewhere you control, and you wait for money. Every part of that depends on keeping the vessel intact and the people alive and useful. These men herd most of the crew into the television room. They take the captain to the bridge. They take the chief engineer, Nestor Tabares, down to the engine room, and they order him to start the main engine and steer for Somalia. The engine will not start, and this is the moment the whole story turns, because what happens next is not what happens when a robbery goes wrong. An incendiary device is set off in the engine room. The fire takes the engine room, it takes the funnel casing, it takes the accommodation block, where the crew live and where the ship's controls are. It does not touch the cargo. Think about what that means. The fuel oil, the actual valuable thing being carried, comes through completely untouched and is later transferred off to another ship. What burns is precisely and only the part of the vessel that makes her worth anything as a vessel. The crew abandon ship. They do not fight the fire in any organized way. They get into an enclosed orange lifeboat and they wait, and the guided missile cruiser USS Philippine Sea comes and takes them off. The photographs you are looking at right now are United States Navy photographs taken that morning. That is the real ship. That is the real smoke. That is the real lifeboat. The men also opened the ship's safe on their way out. By the following morning, a salvage tug is on scene. It belongs to a local company called Poseidon Salvage, run by a Greek salvor named Vasilios Vergos. They arrive fast, impressively fast, and then they fail to put the fire out. So now there is a burned-out tanker floating off Yemen, a $77 million claim on the table, and a group of underwriters in London who have to decide whether to pay it. They do what insurers do. They send a surveyor. His name is Captain David Mockett. He is British, he is experienced, and crucially, he already lives in Aden, which in 2011 is still just about survivable for a Westerner. He can be on that ship in days rather than weeks. He goes aboard, and according to the accounts of the case, he is suspicious almost immediately. The damage does not tell the story he has been told. On the 19th of July, Mockett sends an email. In it, he says he has started to suspect that the men who attacked the Brillante Virtuoso were not Somali and were not pirates. He suspects they were members of the Yemeni Coast Guard or Navy. The next day, the 20th of July, 2011, Captain David Mockett got into his car in Aden. A bomb had been placed in it. It killed him. I want to be precise here, because this is the part of the story where it would be easy to be irresponsible. Nobody has ever been arrested for killing David Mockett. No court has ever established who did it, or why. No court has ever linked his murder to the Brillante Virtuoso, or to any person connected with it. It is unsolved. In 2021, the British Parliament was told that his death had never been properly investigated by British authorities. What is documented is the sequence. He wrote down what he suspected on the 19th. He was killed on the 20th. Draw your own conclusions. The courts never have. And the fear did not stay in Yemen. As the case ground on, the insurers hired armed bodyguards for one of their own lawyers in Greece after he was warned that he had been marked for extermination. The underwriters refused to pay. What followed was one of the longest and most bitterly fought cases in the modern history of the English commercial court. 52 days of trial, naval architects, fire experts, salvage specialists, financial records. Because here is the difficulty with proving something like this. There was no confession. There was no document anywhere that said, "Let us burn the ship." What the underwriters had was a pile of small things that did not fit. Start with the behavior. Real pirates take a ship in order to keep it. These men made no serious attempt to control the vessel or to hold the bridge for a voyage. They put the crew in a television room and left them there. Then the fire. Fire experts examined where the blaze started and how it spread, and concluded it was consistent with an incendiary device placed deliberately in a specific spot, rather than with a firefight or an accident. Then the damage itself. Engine room, funnel casing, accommodation block. If you sat down and wrote the shortest possible list of things to destroy in order to turn a working tanker into a total loss without harming the cargo, you would write down that list. Then the salvors, who reached a burning ship off the coast of Yemen with remarkable speed, and then could not put the fire out. And then the voyage data recorder. The ship's black box had been running the entire time. It captured the order to steer for Somalia. It captured the attempts to start an engine that would not start. It let the court rebuild that night, minute by minute, and hold it up against the version the owner's side was telling. None of those things on its own proves very much. The judge's job was to decide whether there was any innocent explanation that accounted for all of them at once. He decided there was not. In 2015, the court ruled on the first question, which was simply whether the ship counted as a total loss. It did. The indemnity was assessed at $76,328,000. But that was only about the damage. The real question was what caused it. In 2016, the owner's own claim was thrown out of court before it could be tested, because he failed to comply with his disclosure obligations. The judge in that hearing, Mr. Justice Flo, wrote that Iliopoulos had invented a false story to explain missing documents, that he had threatened insurers and their lawyers from the witness box, in what the judge called a disgraceful manner, and that he had lost, in the judge's words, any remaining vestige of credibility. The case carried on without him because the bank that had lent money against the ship was still trying to collect. And in 2019, Mr. Justice Tiare delivered the judgment. He found that the supposed attack by pirates was a fake attack. He described it as a charade orchestrated by Iliopoulos. He said the court was not left in any doubt that the events had been instigated by him. He found that the men who came aboard were current or former members of the Yemeni Coast Guard or Navy, hired to play pirates. Exactly what David Mockett had written in his email 8 years earlier. He found that the conspiracy included the salvors, Poseidon, and Vasilios Virgos, who arrived so quickly and achieved so little. And he found that it included the ship's own master and chief engineer, the captain who lowered the ladder, the engineer who was marched down to the engine room at gunpoint. The claim failed completely. Under Section 55 of the Marine Insurance Act, an insurer does not have to pay for a loss caused by the willful misconduct of the insured. The bank's claim failed alongside it because the bank's rights came through the owner, and the owner's rights were worthless, $77 million. Not a cent of it paid. So here is where it lands. A civil court, after 52 days, found that a ship owner staged a pirate attack on his own vessel and burned it for the insurance money. He has never been charged with a crime. British police did arrest him on suspicion of fraud. He denied it. He was never charged, and as things stand, he has not been prosecuted anywhere for any of this. The men who came aboard were never identified in a criminal court. The salvors were never prosecuted. The captain and the chief engineer were never prosecuted. And Captain David Mockett, the one person in this entire story whose job was simply to go and look at a burned ship and write down what he saw, is the only person who paid anything at all. There is a version of this story where the lesson is that the system worked, The insurers did not pay. The fraud was exposed. The judge said so in public, at length, in a judgment anyone can read. But look at what it took. 8 years, 52 days in court, naval architects and fire experts and forensic accountants. Millions of dollars in legal fees spent by an industry that could afford to fight over a single ship out of the roughly 100,000 that are at sea right now. Almost everything you own arrived on one of them. Your phone, your car, the coffee you drank this morning. 90% of world trade moves by sea through a system of flags of convenience and shell companies and beneficial owners, where the man who actually controls a vessel can sit several countries away from the name on the paperwork. The Brillante Virtuoso got found out because somebody was willing to insure her for 5 times what she was worth, and then refused to pay when she burned. The uncomfortable question is not how this happened. It is how many times it has worked. And that is the racket. If you want more of these, subscribe. It genuinely helps.